Family dinners were supposed to be warm, loud, comforting. Not this. I sat there at the head of the table, still holding my fork awkwardly midair when the knock came at the door. It was sharp. Too formal. My stomach twisted, already sensing something was wrong. My husband, Mark, didn't move. He just kept swirling his wine in his glass like he was posing for a damn magazine shoot. His mother, Lorraine, dabbed the corners of her mouth delicately with a cloth napkin and gave him this small, knowing smile. I swallowed hard. Is someone expecting company? I asked. Mark shrugged lazily. Just a little formality, he said. Before I could question it further, the door opened. I didn't even see who let him in, but suddenly a man in a dark suit was standing there. His briefcase clicked open in a sound that seemed to slice through the room like a scalpel. I'm looking for Mrs. Whitmore, he said crisply, addressing me. I blinked. I'm Mrs. Whitmore. My voice was tight, suspicious. The man nodded once, businesslike, and handed me a thick envelope. These are for you. Urgent delivery. And just like that, he turned and left. For a few moments, no one moved. The envelope sat heavy in my lap, a physical weight I didn't want to touch. My fingertips hovered over the edge. I glanced around the table. Mark lifted his glass to his lips and sipped, as casual as you please. Lorraine leaned in just slightly, her eyes glinting with something that made my skin crawl. I opened it. At first, the words didn't even register. Black ink on white paper, official and cold. Until I saw the header. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My breath caught in my throat. Divorce papers. Filed by me? My vision blurred at the edges. I flipped through the pages with trembling hands, each line worse than the last. Allegations. Division of assets. Custody arrangements, for a child we didn't even have. My name typed neatly on every page as if I had orchestrated this. I looked up, horrified. I didn't file for divorce, I said, my voice breaking. Mark tilted his head slightly, the way someone might look at a dog that didn't understand a command. Oh, we already decided that you would sign, he said coolly. I thought I misheard him. I prayed I had. Lorraine leaned closer across the table, her perfume a sickly sweet cloud that made me nauseous. It would be better if you just cooperate, dear, she said, her tone sugary but her smile razor sharp. I couldn't breathe. They had orchestrated this. Planned it. Delivered it like a performance they were both deeply enjoying. Tears stung the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I turned the last page, hand shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. And that's when I saw it, the fatal flaw. I smiled. It was small at first. Almost involuntary. Then it grew, slow, deliberate, curling at the edges of my mouth like smoke. Because they had no idea what was about to happen next. I lifted my gaze slowly, deliberately, and set the papers down on the pristine white tablecloth. You're right, I said, voice calm and even as my heart pounded in my ears. We should sign something tonight. Mark's smile faltered. Lorraine's face twitched, just slightly. Good. I reached into my purse under the table and pulled out a slim red folder I had hidden there for weeks, waiting for the right moment. It landed on the table with a quiet, definitive thud. You first, I said sweetly. And for the first time that night, Mark actually looked nervous. Mark stared at the red folder like it might explode. Lorraine shifted in her seat, her pearl bracelet clinking softly against the table as she folded her arms, defensive now. What is that? Mark asked, voice sharp, cutting through the heavy air. I tilted my head, letting the silence stretch between us until it crackled. Then, slowly, deliberately, I opened the folder and pulled out the first set of documents. Funny, I said, keeping my voice light, almost amused. Since we're all feeling so formal tonight, I thought you might like to see my paperwork too. I slid the first page across the table to him. He hesitated before picking it up, and when he did, the blood drained from his face. It was a notarized record of every asset that was solely in my name. The house. The car. The joint savings account? Turns out, not so joint anymore. I had transferred my share weeks ago, on the advice of my lawyer. Mark's hands trembled slightly as he flipped through page after page, each one driving the knife a little deeper. What is this? He demanded, his bravado slipping into panic. I sipped my wine, savoring the moment. It's called preparation, sweetheart. I smiled sweetly. You didn't really think you were the only one making plans, did you? Lorraine made a small choking sound, like a hen clucking in distress. This isn't fair, she hissed. You can't just. I can, I said, cutting her off, my voice still now. And I did. Mark pushed back his chair abruptly, the leg scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "You're being irrational," he barked. He gestured wildly at the papers, at the dinner, at the broken remains of whatever delusion he had clung to. "This could have been civil if you had just cooperated." Civil. That word. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that startled even me. "You mean like handing me fake divorce papers at a family dinner?" I asked. "Civil like ambushing me in my own home?" Mark's face twisted, caught between anger and embarrassment. He opened his mouth again, but I was already standing, pulling out the final page from the red folder. The trump card. "This is a copy of the power of attorney you signed when we refinanced the house last year," I said, laying it neatly in front of him. "Remember that? When you couldn't be bothered to read what you were signing because you were too busy golfing with your buddies?" Mark stared at the page like it might physically hurt him. "That document gave me full financial authority," I said, almost gently. "I sold the house yesterday." Lorraine gasped, one hand flying to her mouth. You liar." I shrugged. "It closed this morning. Funds transferred. All neat and legal." I turned to Mark. "So you can file all the fake divorce papers you want, but you'll be doing it from a hotel room. Because as of noon today." I smiled, slow and vicious. "This house isn't ours anymore." The room exploded. Lorraine screeched, a sound so high-pitched I thought the windows might crack. Mark swore under his breath, his whole body shaking with rage. I stood there, feeling almost eerily calm. The hurricane I had once feared had arrived, and somehow, I was standing right in the eye of it, untouched. "You tried to trap me," I said, gathering the papers back into the folder. "You tried to corner me." I looked directly into Mark's stunned, furious eyes. "But you forgot one important thing." I leaned down, whispering just loud enough for both of them to hear. "I always have an exit." I straightened up, slipping the red folder back into my purse, smoothing my dress as if nothing had happened. Lorraine's chair scraped back violently as she lunged to her feet. "You think this is over?" she shrieked. "You think you can just walk away from this family?" I met her eyes with a smile that felt sharp enough to cut. "I don't think, Lorraine," I said sweetly. "I know." I turned on my heel and walked to the door, my heart pounding but my steps steady, sure. Behind me, Mark's voice cracked through the chaos. "You'll regret this," he shouted. I paused at the door, hand on the knob. Without looking back, I said, "No, Mark, you will." And with that, I stepped out into the cool night air, free. But I wasn't done yet, not even close. I didn't even slam the door behind me. I wanted them to sit there with it. That yawning silence. That ugly, gaping hole of powerlessness they never expected to feel. The night air hit my face like a baptism. I breathed in deep, feeling something uncoil inside me that had been trapped for too long. A cab was already idling at the end of the driveway. I had booked it under the table when Mark was pouring the wine, smug and oblivious. I slid into the back seat. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked. "Downtown," I said, the words tasting like victory on my tongue. "The office of Renner, Hayes and Goldstein. My lawyer." Because oh, yes, there was more. While Mark and Lorraine had been busy plotting their little dinner theater betrayal, I had been signing real, binding paperwork with a far sharper set of knives. The sale of the house was just the appetizer. I clutched my purse tightly on my lap, feeling the red folder inside like a secret weapon. One they had stupidly handed me, without ever knowing. By the time we pulled up to the law offices, it was nearly 8 p.m., but the lights inside were still burning. Mr. Goldstein himself, a sharp-eyed man who smiled like he already knew the ending to every story, opened the door for me. "You're right on time," he said, glancing at the folder in my hand. "Is it done?" I smiled. "It's done." He ushered me into the conference room where two other people were waiting, a financial consultant, and a court officer with a slim, leather-bound folder of his own. I sat down. Goldstein leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "They've already called, by the way," he said conversationally. I raised an eyebrow. 3 times, he added with a grin. "Once yelling, once pleading, and once threatening to ruin your life." He chuckled. "Amateurs." I should have been scared. Maybe even a little heartbroken. But instead, all I felt was this cold, clean clarity. I opened my folder, sliding over everything he needed, proof of the property sale, evidence of financial independence, and one last little gem I had tucked away. An affidavit. Sworn and notarized. Detailing Mark's and Lorraine's efforts to coerce me into signing under duress. With witnesses. They had been so sloppy, so sure of themselves, they didn't even notice the neighbor's nanny in the yard next door, recording bits and pieces on her phone. I had offered to pay her for the footage. She refused, said she'd seen enough of those two over the years to know exactly who needed the help. Goldstein whistled low under his breath as he scanned the papers. They are absolutely screwed, he said. Good. They deserved worse. Let's file the motion tonight, I said. He nodded. Already drafting it. We weren't just divorcing. We were doing it my way, with full control of the narrative, the assets, and, thanks to the evidence, a strong case for damages. I signed where he pointed, my hand steady. By the time I left the office an hour later, Mark's fake little divorce ambush had officially backfired into the beginning of a legal battle he had no hope of winning. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I was going to dismantle everything he thought he could steal from me, brick by brick. When I checked my phone later that night in the hotel room, a beautiful corner suite overlooking the river, there were 27 missed calls. Mark, Lorraine. Even Mark's cousin, trying to guilt me into keeping the family intact. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I ordered room service. Steak, rare. A bottle of champagne, just because. As I ate, I scrolled through the social media feeds that Lorraine loved so much, those carefully curated pictures of family values, loyalty, and faith. Fake, brittle things. About to collapse like the house of cards they really were. My lawyer had advised me to stay quiet. No public statements yet. But as I sipped my champagne, I couldn't resist posting one thing. A simple photo of the river view, with one caption. Freedom looks good on me. I knew Lorraine would see it. I knew Mark would stew over it. And that was just the beginning. I woke the next morning to a barrage of messages. Some angry. Some pleading. A few desperate ones, Mark promising we could fix this if I just came back home. Home. As if that word still meant anything between us. I smiled to myself as I slipped into a clean dress, heels clicking sharply against the hotel floor. Today wasn't about answering their calls. Today was about ending it, on my terms. By noon, the court had received the emergency motion my lawyer filed. By 2 o'clock, an official notice was served to Mark's office. An official counterfiling, requesting full asset separation, citing coercion, and, the best part, requesting a protective order due to the aggressive and manipulative tactics he and his mother had used. Mark didn't even try to contest it immediately. He couldn't. The evidence was airtight, and he knew it. Still, I wasn't naive. I knew people like Mark and Lorraine didn't just slink away quietly when they lost. I was ready for the final scene. They showed up at the hotel that night. I heard the knock, not sharp and formal like the lawyers. This was messy. Desperate. I opened the door just enough to see Mark and Lorraine standing there. Mark's tie was loose, his face pale. Lorraine looked haggard, her lipstick smudged at the corners. We just want to talk, Mark said. His voice was raw, like he had been yelling. I leaned against the doorframe, cool and composed. Talk? I repeated, as if tasting the word for the first time. You're being unreasonable. Lorraine burst out, her voice shrill. We were trying to protect you, protect the family. I laughed. Actually laughed, right in her face. That's what that was? I asked. Protection? Mark stepped forward, hands out like he could still smooth it over. You weren't supposed to find out like this, he said quickly. Lorraine she thought you were. He faltered. He couldn't even say it. She thought I wasn't good enough, I finished for him, voice sharp as broken glass. So she staged a betrayal in my own home. And you stood there, sipped your wine, and let her. He flinched. Good. Lorraine crossed her arms tightly, lips pressed into a thin, bitter line. You're throwing away everything over a misunderstanding, she said coldly. No, I said, straightening. I'm throwing away a marriage that was already rotting at the roots. I let that hang in the air. Then I smiled, slow and deliberate. And as for you, Lorraine, I turned my full gaze on her, sharp and merciless, you're about to find out what it feels like to be powerless. For once in your life. Mark opened his mouth again, but I cut him off. Oh, and just so you're both prepared for the next surprise, I pulled a slim, glossy envelope from behind the door and tossed it at Mark's feet. It landed with a sharp slap on the tile. What's this? He asked warily. A copy of the lawsuit, I said casually. Fraud, harassment, emotional distress. Filed against you both. And yes, there's video evidence. Witnesses. Paper trails. Lorraine's mouth opened, then closed like a fish gasping on dry land. You can't, she sputtered. I already did. I didn't wait for a reaction. I closed the door in their faces, the final punctuation mark on a sentence they never thought I'd finish. I leaned back against the door for a moment, letting the silence soak into me. The final severing. The final freedom. My phone buzzed. A message from Goldstein. Just got confirmation. Protective order granted. Accounts frozen pending asset review. They can't touch a thing. I smiled. It was over. The woman they tried to back into a corner had not just escaped. She had burned the whole trap down behind her. Later that night, I stood by the window, looking out over the city lights. For the first time in years, I felt light, untethered, alive. Not just because I had won. Not just because I had gotten revenge. But because I had finally chosen myself. Not loyalty to a man who wouldn't defend me. Not appeasement to a woman who thought she could own me. Me. And for the first time in a long, long time, that was enough. I raised a glass of champagne to the night sky and whispered, "To new beginnings." And I meant it.